Nia Okoye was sitting on the edge of her bed in her small Lagos apartment, scrolling through her phone after a long, tiring shift at the hospital. The city outside was quiet, only the occasional sound of a car horn or a dog barking breaking the stillness. Then her phone rang. Seeing her mother's name flash on the screen, she smiled softly, thinking of the usual late-night calls filled with Mama Adana's gentle advice or a reminder to eat properly. But the voice on the other end was not her mother. It was her cousin, breathless and trembling. "Nia. Mama, she's gone." For a moment, Nia couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened and tears blurred her vision. Memories came rushing back. Mama Adana's warm hugs, the way she always knew just what to say when life felt impossible, the sacrifices she made to keep the family afloat. Nia's knees felt weak as the weight of loss settled on her. Before she could gather herself, Tund, her husband, burst into the room. "Why don't we just handle this later?" he said sharply. "Postpone the funeral for now. We need to talk about what happened with the car payment." His voice was calm on the surface, but carried a sharp edge of control. Nia shook her head, anger mixing with grief. This was not the time for arguments. "No, Tund," she said firmly, her voice breaking but resolute. "I need to be there. She was my mother. I will honor her." With that, she grabbed her bag, slipped on her shoes, and stepped out into the cool Lagos night. Each step felt heavy, but her resolve grew stronger. She was heading to say goodbye properly, no matter what Tund said. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Her mother deserved that. Nia pulled up to the funeral home in Victoria Island, her heart pounding as the city lights reflected off the sleek glass windows. She stepped out of the car, feeling the cool night air on her face, and immediately saw a crowd gathered. Faces she knew and some she didn't. Family members she hadn't seen in years whispered quietly among themselves, distant cousins exchanging condolences, neighbors offering gentle pats on the shoulder. The air was thick with sorrow, heavy with the smell of flowers and the faint scent of incense. Inside, the atmosphere was just as solemn. Mama Adana's friends, colleagues from her years at the local hospital, and church members stood in small groups, murmuring words of sympathy. Some clutched tissues, eyes red and watery. Others hugged Nia tightly, letting her lean on them as her own grief surged. Each step she took toward the casket felt like walking through a storm of memories. Mama Adana's laughter, her unwavering kindness, the way she had always made everyone feel welcome and loved. Nia fought back tears, knowing this was her last chance to say goodbye in the presence of everyone who had mattered to her. The quiet hum of mourning was suddenly broken by a sharp voice. Tund arrived, his posture stiff, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Nia. He walked toward her, his expression unreadable but his tone commanding. "You will leave right after this." "Now," he said, loud enough for several people nearby to hear. A ripple of shocked whispers spread through the mourners. Eyes widened, eyebrows raised. Some looked away awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. Nia felt her chest tighten, her fists clenched at her sides, nails biting into her palms as anger mixed with grief. This was no longer just a funeral. It had become a test of her will, a quiet battlefield where Tund's control was being laid bare in front of everyone. She could feel the stares of relatives and friends, some silently cheering her on, others waiting to see how she would react. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Tund's words might have been meant to intimidate her, but they only fueled her determination. Mama Adana had raised her to stand tall, to honor her values, and to protect her dignity. This moment was about more than just saying goodbye. It was about showing that she would not be silenced, even in her deepest sorrow. Nia squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the journey she had started that night was only just beginning. Nia sat quietly in the corner of the funeral home, the low murmur of grieving voices around her fading into the background. Her mind drifted back to her childhood in Acadia, and suddenly she was there again, running barefoot through the dusty streets, Mama Adana calling after her with that familiar, gentle voice. She remembered waking up to the smell of fried plantains and steaming jollof rice, the sound of Mama humming while ironing her school uniform, even when her hands were sore and her body tired from a night shift at the hospital. Mama Adana had always worked tirelessly. She balanced multiple jobs, nursing, tutoring, sometimes selling handcrafted items at the local market. Yet she never let her fatigue touch Nia and her sibling. Nia recalled evenings when her mother would sit with her at the tiny kitchen table, helping with homework, listening to her worries, offering advice that somehow made even the darkest problems feel lighter. "Resilience, my child," she would say softly, brushing Nia's hair back from her face, "is about standing tall when the world wants to push you down. And dignity. Never give it up, no matter who asks for it. Even in the hardest times, when money was tight and their small apartment felt suffocating, Mama Adana's laughter could fill the room, her stories turning struggles into lessons. She taught Nia to be independent, to think for herself, and to never allow anyone to control her spirit. Nia remembered the way her mother's eyes would shine when she praised her sibling's small achievement, or how Mama would quietly adjust a tear-streaked shirt or wipe away a tear without ever making a fuss. Those moments, ordinary as they seemed then, were now golden memories that pulsed through Nia's heart like a lifeline. As Nia sat in the grief-filled room, those memories strengthened her. She could almost feel her mother's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "I will honor her the right way," Nia whispered to herself, her voice trembling but firm. "Even if it costs everything, I will not let anyone take this moment away from me or from her memory." The warmth of Mama Adana's love, the lessons of courage and dignity she had instilled, gave Nia the courage to face the tension and control that loomed ahead. Every memory reminded her of what truly mattered: family, respect, and the unshakable strength that her mother had passed down to her. Nia drew in a slow, deep breath, readying herself. Her mother's legacy was alive in her now, and she would carry it forward, strong, unafraid, and unwavering. Nia stepped out of the funeral home into the parking lot, trying to gather herself. The night air was heavy, and the quiet hum of distant traffic felt strangely loud after the grief inside. She thought she could finally breathe, even just a little, when a firm hand gripped her arm. She turned to see Tund, his face set hard, eyes flashing with anger. "Come home now, or I'll pull you back by any means," he shouted, his voice echoing across the empty lot. Nia felt a chill run down her spine. Fear prickled at the edge of her mind, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of anger. How dare he speak to her like this? On a night meant for mourning her mother, her heart still raw and breaking. She drew back slightly, her voice trembling but firm. "No, Tund, not tonight. My mother is gone, and I will honor her. I need to be here for my family." Her words rang sharper than she expected, slicing through the tension. Tund's jaw tightened, frustration evident. "You don't understand. This is about us, about your responsibilities." "Responsibilities?" Nia interrupted, her hands clenching into fists. "My responsibility tonight is to my mother, the woman who raised me, who gave me everything. You cannot decide this for me." Her chest heaved, the grief and anger mingling into a potent force she hadn't felt before. For a moment silence fell. Then, from the edge of the parking lot, a few relatives had begun to notice. Whispered murmurs floated toward them, curious eyes peeking from behind parked cars and the corner of the building. Nia could feel the weight of those eyes, but instead of intimidation, it bolstered her courage. She wasn't alone. Mama Adana had taught her to stand tall, to defend her dignity, and this was no different. Tund stepped closer, voice lowering but still threatening. "I won't ask again, Nia. You will come with me now." Nia straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I am not going anywhere. Not tonight. I will say goodbye the way she deserves. If you try to force me, you will only prove how little respect you have for her, and for me." The tension hung thick in the air, heavy as the night itself. Nia could feel the first stirrings of a crowd forming, relatives peeking, sensing the conflict. She knew this confrontation would not stay private for long, but she didn't care. For the first time in a long time, she realized her mother's lessons had prepared her for this exact moment. Courage, dignity, and the unshakable resolve to stand for what was right, no matter the cost. Nia's heart raced as Tund's shadow loomed over her in the funeral home parking lot, his anger sharp and suffocating. Just as his hand lifted slightly, threatening, she felt a presence beside her. Chinello, her older sister, stepped forward, her eyes blazing with protective fury. "Tund, step back," she said firmly, placing a hand lightly on Nia's shoulder. "She's not going anywhere until she's ready." Obinna, her younger brother, moved to stand beside them, his expression equally determined. "You have no right to push her like this," he added, voice steady but edged with warning. Nia felt a rush of relief and gratitude. The fear that had curled in her chest began to loosen as her siblings' support wrapped around her like a shield. Tund's eyes narrowed, frustration flickering. "This is about order in the house," he shouted, attempting to assert control, but the murmurs of relatives around them grew louder, curious, and uneasy. Some distant cousins and neighbors edged closer, sensing the tension, while others whispered their disapproval. Nia noticed Aunt Ifioma, a longtime family friend who had always admired Mama Adana's wisdom, stepped forward, her calm yet piercing gaze fixed on Tund. "Enough, young man," she said quietly but with authority. "Show some respect. This is not the time to assert control." The collective presence of family around Nia began to shift the energy in Tund's chest heaved as he realized his dominance was waning. Each relative's silent support for Nia reinforced her courage, like bricks forming a wall she could stand behind. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and felt a power she hadn't felt in years, an emotional strength rooted in love, respect, and shared grief. Chinello squeezed her hand. "You're not alone, Nia," she whispered, and Nia let herself take in that truth. Obinna nodded, adding, "We've got you. Always." Nia's heart swelled, and for the first time that night, she felt the sharp edges of fear dull slightly. Tun's attempts to argue about household authority fell flat. The voices around him, steady and unwavering, drowned out his claims. Nia realized then that this moment wasn't just about the funeral. It was about claiming her autonomy, showing that her mother's lessons of dignity, strength, and independence lived on in her and in her family. The crowd of relatives, friends, and neighbors who had admired Mama Adana's life now bore witness to Tun's controlling behavior. And as Nia stood surrounded by those who supported her, she knew something had shifted. The power dynamic had changed. Tonight, she was not only honoring her mother, she was stepping into her own strength, ready for whatever came next. As the mourners filed past Mama Adana's casket, Nia noticed a small, neatly wrapped bundle placed carefully on the table nearby. It was addressed to her, in her mother's familiar, flowing handwriting. Her heart pounded as she picked it up, feeling the weight of it in her hands. Letters, journals, and notes, stacked and tied with a faded ribbon. Something inside told her that this was more than just keepsakes. It was her mother's final message, left just for her. Nia slipped into a quiet corner of the funeral home, her siblings Chinello and Obina close behind. She untied the ribbon and began flipping through the pages. The first letter was warm, loving, filled with memories of Nia as a little girl, her mother's pride in her, her encouragement, her gentle reminders to always stand tall. But as she read further, the tone shifted. Mama Adana had written about the hidden struggles of their family, about how Tund had quietly manipulated finances, taking advantage of trust and authority. The letters spoke of betrayals Nia had never suspected, of decisions that favored control over love, and of Mama Adana's deep wish that Nia remain independent, strong, and unafraid. Nia's eyes filled with tears, but her hands did not tremble. She looked at Chinello and Obina, who nodded for her to continue. Taking a deep breath, she began reading aloud, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. Tund has never respected the space and choices of our family, she said, her words cutting through the room. He sought to control, to silence, and to manipulate. But Mama wanted me to know, always, to stand for myself, to protect my dignity, and never let fear rule my life. Gasps rippled through the mourners. Some relatives whispered in shock, others shook their heads in disbelief. Friends of her mother, who had admired her integrity, leaned closer, eyes wide as Nia read passages about resilience, independence, and the importance of truth. The funeral home, once heavy with quiet mourning, was now charged with tension and revelation. With each letter she read, Nia felt her mother's presence stronger, almost tangible. It was as if Mama Adana's voice wrapped around her, shielding her from Tund's threats and reminding her of the lessons she had been taught. Nia's sorrow turned into quiet power. Her grief became purpose. She was not just reading letters, she was claiming the truth, exposing manipulation, and protecting her mother's legacy. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Eyes shifted toward Tund, some filled with judgment, some with disbelief. Nia's shoulders were straight, her voice unwavering. Mama Adana had left her more than memories. She had left her a shield, a moral compass, and the courage to stand her ground. In that moment, Nia knew with certainty she would honor her mother's wishes, no matter the cost, and no one could stop her. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the small cemetery in Victoria Island. A gentle breeze stirred the flowers surrounding Mama Adana's grave as mourners gathered, their faces pale with grief. Nia stood close to the coffin, her hands trembling slightly, but her back straight. Her heart ached, but she felt a strange steadiness inside her, a strength she hadn't known she possessed until this moment. As the coffin was slowly lowered into the earth, Tund stepped forward, his face tight with anger and frustration. "This isn't over, Nia," he shouted, his voice echoing across the quiet cemetery. "You will come with me. This family belongs under my rules." The crowd froze, a wave of tension rippling through them. Everyone could feel the weight of the confrontation. The air was thick with expectation. Nia took a slow, steady breath, feeling the eyes of her siblings, relatives, and Mama Adana's friends on her. She raised her voice, calm but firm. "This family belongs to no one but itself," she said. "Not to anyone who tries to control it or silence it. Tund, your actions, your constant need to dominate, to make decisions for me, to belittle those who love me, stop here. Mama raised me to be independent, to respect myself and others, and to stand tall no matter what. She taught me dignity, courage, and love that empowers rather than controls." The mourners shifted, some nodding, some whispering in agreement, their eyes fixed on Tund. He opened his mouth to speak, to argue, but the words faltered as the weight of the crowd pressed down on him. Nia's voice, steady and unwavering, continued. "Your threats and your anger mean nothing here. Tonight, I honor my mother. I honor her lessons and her legacy. And I will not allow fear or control to take that away from me or from this family." Tund's face paled slightly, realizing that he was no longer facing just a grieving wife. He was facing the collective strength of a family and a community who respected truth and courage. His attempts to intimidate her seemed smaller under the gaze of everyone around them. Nia's heart swelled as she finished speaking. She could feel Mama Adana's presence with her, as if her mother herself were nodding in approval. The mourners, once silent and sorrowful, now stood with a quiet sense of validation. Respect, autonomy, and self-worth, the values Mama Adana had instilled in her, were alive in Nia's words and actions. Tun took a step back, tension draining from his shoulders as he realized the futility of his control. Nia, though still grieving, felt a lightness inside her. She had faced him, spoken the truth, and protected her mother's legacy. In that moment, at the gravesite, she understood the power of courage, the weight of truth, and the freedom that comes when you refuse to be silent. After Nia's words at the gravesite, a hush fell over the small crowd. For a moment, it felt like the weight of the world had paused. Then, one by one, people began to speak. A neighbor, who had watched Nia grow up, stepped forward. "I have known Nia since she was a little girl," she said, her voice steady. "She has always been kind, hardworking, and brave. I have never seen her back down from doing what is right." Others nodded, murmuring their agreement. From the church, Mama Adana's pastor stepped closer. "Mama Adana taught us all how to live with dignity," he said, "and her daughter carries that same spirit. No one has the right to try to control her or intimidate her, especially not today." His words carried weight, and several church members began sharing their own memories of Nia and her mother. How Mama Adana had helped widows, counseled young women, and always stood up for fairness. They spoke of Nia's own contributions, volunteering at local clinics, mentoring youth, and quietly helping families in need. Even colleagues from Mama Adana's hospital arrived, voicing support for Nia. "We have seen her dedication, not just to her work, but to her family and her community," one nurse said. "She learned from her mother to be strong and independent. No one should try to take that away." The murmurs grew into a chorus of validation. Each story, each voice, pushed Tund further into the background. The once confident control he tried to assert now seemed fragile. The eyes around him were not just watching, they were judging. Whispers of disappointment and quiet disapproval spread through the crowd. Friends and family who had once hesitated now openly sided with Nia. She was not alone. She was supported by an entire community that valued respect, courage, and honesty. Tun's face darkened with frustration. He tried to argue, to claim authority, but no one listened. Every voice that rose against him, every story of Nia's integrity and her mother's wisdom, isolated him emotionally and publicly. The power he had counted on vanished, replaced by the collective strength of those who believed in fairness and truth. Nia felt a surge of relief mixed with pride. The community's support was more than comforting, it was empowering. She could feel the energy of solidarity, the strength that comes from people standing together for what is right. Mama Adana's lessons about community, respect, and accountability had never been more alive. As she looked around, seeing friends, neighbors, and family members rallying behind her, Nia knew she could face whatever came next. The crowd had become her shield, their voices her armor. Tund could no longer intimidate her. Not here, not now, not ever. In that moment, the power of unity, of African communal support, shone brightly, showing that no one could stand alone when truth and justice called. The funeral was over, and the crowd had slowly dispersed, leaving the cemetery quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Nia stood for a moment by her mother's grave, letting the weight of the day settle over her. The grief was still there, but so was a new sense of clarity, a sharp, undeniable understanding that her life would no longer be dictated by fear or control. Tund hovered nearby, his face a mixture of frustration and confusion. "Nia, we need to talk," he said, his voice pleading now, less commanding and more uncertain. But Nia shook her head firmly. "Not now, Tund. Not like this. I need time. I need space. And I need to live my life on my terms." She walked away from the gravesite, each step lighter than the last. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of freedom mingled with purpose. Her mind was already turning to the practical steps she needed to take to protect herself and her daughter, Amara. Nia knew that independence wasn't just emotional, it had to be practical too. She decided to consult a trusted lawyer, someone who could help her understand her rights and secure her finances, ensuring Tund could not manipulate or control her future. Back at her apartment later that evening, Nia began organizing her plan. She reviewed bank accounts, made calls to financial advisors, and started drafting ideas for a budget that would allow her and Amara to live comfortably without depending on anyone else. Every action felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she had long thought lost. Most importantly, she spent time with Amara, explaining gently but clearly that their life together would be guided by dignity, respect, and independence. She promised her daughter that no one would ever make her feel powerless again. "You are strong, Amara," Nia said, holding her close. "And I will do everything to make sure you always know your worth." Amara's eyes sparkled with trust, and in that moment, Nia felt the deep, grounding power of her mother's legacy living on in her child. By the end of the night, Nia felt a quiet pride. She had faced the grief of losing her mother, the intimidation of Tund, and the expectations of family and society, and she had chosen herself. Every step she had taken reflected courage, healing, and empowerment. She wasn't just surviving, she was building a life of agency, a life where she could make decisions freely, protect her loved ones, and honor her mother's teachings. As she finally rested that night, Nia knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she, and only she, would write the story of her life, guided by love, strength, and the enduring spirit of Mama Adana. Weeks after the funeral, Nia stood in the bright, open space of Mama Adana's community center, sunlight streaming through the windows. The walls were decorated with colorful murals, and the air buzzed with laughter and conversation. Widows, young women, and children from the neighborhood moved around, learning new skills, sharing stories, and finding the kind of support that Mama Adana had always believed in. Nia walked among them, offering encouragement, helping with small tasks, and feeling the warmth of a community coming together. Tund appeared one afternoon, hesitant and awkward, trying to approach her. "Nia, I want us to work things out," he said, his voice soft, almost pleading. Nia shook her head, her expression calm but firm. "No, Tund, not now. I have found my strength, my peace, and my purpose. This is not about anger. It's about living with dignity, the way my mother taught me." He looked down, realizing that the control he had tried to exert was gone. Later, Nia watched from the garden as her daughter, Amara, ran between flower beds and played with other children. The sight filled her with joy and pride. Every smile, every laugh, reminded her of her mother's lessons: courage, independence, kindness, and resilience. She felt Mama Adana's spirit with her, gentle and strong, guiding her steps as she built a future filled with love and freedom. For the first time in years, Nia felt fully at peace. She had honored her mother, reclaimed her life, and created a space where others could find hope and strength. Standing there, watching Amara play and hearing the happy chatter of the community, Nia whispered to herself, a smile spreading across her face. "My mother raised me to be free. Today, I live that freedom, with her spirit beside me forever."